Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network, and today's topic is expanding into wholeness. So, if we're to love and accept ourselves, it means all of us, every part of ourselves. And if we can expand to include those elements rather than exiling them or rejecting them or judging them, then we can achieve a level of wholeness that allows us to live life more fully, more completely. So that's what we're going to talk about this morning. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, all your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present, and allow all those sensations right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, expanding into wholeness, we judge. We judge ourselves, we judge others. And when we judge ourselves, what we're doing is we're creating this separation from ourselves. And if we're to move into self-love, self-acceptance, it means being willing to appreciate all aspects of ourselves, of our being. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you joining us this morning. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us. So we're talking about expanding into wholeness. So the thing is, we don't just judge ourselves based on negative things. We also oftentimes don't allow ourselves to appreciate the wonderful things about ourselves. So we judge ourselves negatively, and we also don't acknowledge ourselves positively. So we don't necessarily get to really see who we are. We don't get to fully embrace ourselves. So without fully embracing ourselves, how can we possibly come into wholeness? So Love by God says Wednesday blessing, and right back at you. Why not? I love it. So thank you for that. So when I just did a meditation from Joe Dispenza, and it was an evening meditation, and it was looking back on the day and looking back at the decisions that we made, or I made, looking back at the decisions that I made during the day, and looking at how those decisions might serve in creating the life that I'm desiring. And so when in looking back at these choices and decisions and actions and whatever that and reactions that I had during the day, it was interesting to notice the perspective, the initial jump to judgment, rather than simple observation. And I think that when we are able to neutralize our reactivity, well, actually, the reactivity can be informative too. So if we think of something and it stimulates upset or shame or regret, then that's worth looking at to say, okay, well, is that a kind of behavior that I want to engage in going forward? Is that rather than punishing ourselves, using that visceral response as feedback to say, oh, okay, so it doesn't really feel good when I think about having done that way. What might have led me to react that way? The what might have led me to that within myself, not looking to blame others, but like in my history or in my life, where's that reactivity coming from? That gives us an opportunity for healing rather than trying to shove it away or judging it or beating ourselves up for something. If there are actions to take to remedy something, that, like if you, for example, had an argument with someone and the air needs to be cleared, or an apology needs to be given, or clarification or whatever, but to notice with curiosity. We talk a lot about curiosity and compassion and how curiosity is the antidote to judgment. And so when we can allow ourselves to be curious, then we don't necessarily jump into that space of judgment, which is creating this rift. And what we want to do is we want to be able to expand ourselves to include all aspects. And I noticed that lots of people have a challenge with recognizing their greatness too. If people have a challenge recognizing what they did well or what they do well. And the reason that I hear people saying that they have a problem with that is because they don't want to get too carried away with themselves. They don't want to be egotistical, and they don't want to get too full of themselves. And I think that if we can learn to observe our strengths as well as observe our weaknesses without the reactivity, sort of as more objectively, then we can recognize that we are all of it, that we can have an inclusive view of ourselves that is more balanced, because I think most people I'm aware of, I don't know most people, but most people I'm aware of are quick to criticize themselves and not so quick to experience, not to laud themselves, not to applaud themselves. So in looking at our day, looking at our choices, I think there's a richness in that to be able to say, okay, this was really in alignment with who I am and who I want to be. And yeah, I think I did well there. And no, I think that in this situation, maybe I could have done been I may have been able to, I wish I had behaved differently. And or I wish I had made a different choice, or I wish I had or and I'm not talking about really wishing. I'm just saying, looking back at it, is saying, okay, well, what could I have done differently? How could I have done that better? Um, and when I say better, what I mean by that is more in alignment, because I think ultimately that that's what we're looking for, is to live our lives in alignment with our values. And at least this is what I'm looking for. I'm making the assumption that that's something that most of us would desire, is to live in alignment with our values and with our intentions for ourselves and our lives. So the inventory is a really awesome thing, and it has some potential pitfalls as part of it, because it's opening us up to evaluate our performance or our experience, but it gives us an opportunity to look at, well, did that serve me? Did that serve me? And how can I better serve me and my intentions in life? So this wholeness and expanding into it by including all aspects, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, the whole thing. And recognizing that the idea of the polarities, the good, the bad, whatever, is not really where we're looking to come from particularly, but what I'm wanting to convey is maybe aligned, misaligned, or out of alignment. And how can we bring ourselves into this greater alignment, not beating ourselves up for being out of alignment, but recognizing certain patterns, maybe looking for the opportunity to dissolve certain patterns that we may not, that don't serve us well. So I don't know if this is really relevant directly to what we're talking about in terms of expanding to include, but one of the biggest tools that we have in transformation is reframing. And so I had this wonderful session with a client yesterday, who has experienced anxiety. And one of the things that occurs for them is, when they're feeling anxious about something, what goes through their head is, oh my God, like, this is whatever the situation is. And there's this panic, oh my God, oh my God. And what we arrived at, which was so beautiful, because this person is a very spiritually devout person, and we transformed that to, oh my God, thank you, instead of, oh my God, this is a disaster, but more like, oh my God, thank you. Like, I'm connecting. And I think that to bring that back to our conversation about expanding to include and moving into wholeness, and the process of moving into wholeness is finding a way to embrace all aspects of ourselves. And we live in a pretty binary culture. I don't know if it's a binary world, but our culture is pretty much black and white, right and wrong, good or bad in so many ways. And when we think about two sides of a coin, that's a saying that we have, right? There's two sides to every coin. But the thing is, there's actually three. So there's heads, tails, and then there's the edge. And it's that edge that unifies the heads or the tails. And it's the edge that creates the wholeness, or the middle, if you want to say that. It's unifying all of it. And when we can take something like, oh my god, it's like it's a disaster, to oh my god, to it's a celebration, the same words. What is it that's unifying that polarity? Is there's something in between those extremes, right? And we if when we embrace those extremes, the heads and the tails, we then are creating a unity. I don't know, that might be a stretch, but kind of a cool analogy, maybe. I do love that idea of the unifying force, or unifying motion, or the unifier that brings these polarities together. And we as individuals can be a mass of contradictions. You know, it's not like we're consistent all the time, and that's okay. We are contradictory beings in so many ways. Like, we'll act one way in one situation and act very, very different in another. And those two ways of acting don't seem to resolve together necessarily, but they do resolve in that they are part of our own expression. And this is another reason why I like to think of us not as static personalities or static beings, but as process, that we ebb and flow, right? We have core values. We don't always know what they are, but typically we have core values that we live by, conscious or otherwise, and we don't always live in alignment with those values. Sometimes we violate those values, and when we don't even know what the values were and we violate the values, it creates sort of a disruption, an upset. And so getting clarity around what our values are is a very helpful, powerful thing in making choices. When we know our values, you know, when we consciously are present to our values, it can be very, very helpful in decision making. Because we can say, well, okay, it's more important to me to be kind than it is to, I don't know, here's an interesting one, than it is to be honest. So maybe I'll say a white lie, for example, out of kindness. I guess that opens a whole debate as to whether that's really kind or not, but this is just an example that I was trying to manufacture in the moment. It's interesting. I was listening to something on NPR. I guess it was last weekend, or recently, and it was talking about lying. And they were saying pretty much that everybody lies. And it's a matter of degree. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting. I don't think we consider ourselves liars. And maybe we tell untruths to ourselves even. Like, I didn't have time. I didn't have time to do that. That's a good one, right? I didn't have time to do that. It's really, I didn't choose to allocate time to do that. It's not that I didn't have time, it's that I made other choices, right? That's more of the truth. And Rosalind is saying, laugh, LOL. But we say those things all the time. And now that also, it's not all the time. We say those things. It's not uncommon that we say things like that. Or I've got to get going now when we want to end a call. Or a meeting. Got to get going when we don't necessarily have something else to run to, right? So I thought, wow, this is so interesting, because most of us probably value honesty. And yet there are these social conventions. Face blue smiling. Oh, blue smiley face, says love by God. So yeah, it's interesting, right? We don't consider ourselves liars. But here we have these social conventions that, how are you? Oh, fine, when your life is in crisis, right? And so when we see these things, we can actually then open ourselves to choice about them, right? If we're not aware, we're not at choice. And we may choose to continue to say things like that. And that, it's not that it's different when we choose. So we get to expand to include all these contradictions, and appreciate what we do well, and appreciate our special beauties, and appreciate our Achilles heels and our foibles and our quirks. And we get to expand to include all of it. And as we do allow for more and more of that acceptance, we become more and more whole, less and less reactive, because we're able to include those parts of ourselves. So what I notice is that people will get really reactive when you call when you call somebody on something, or someone calls us on something that we haven't reconciled. We tend to get really reactive, right? So the more we're able to expand to include those things too, then the more whole we can become. And the less identified we become with any particular way of being, because we know that we've got the whole spectrum going on. So anyway, expand to include. That's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. And as always, it's such a pleasure and a privilege to share these morning musings together. And so until next time.